I am a fifth-generation descendant from the town of Mat, Hungary. For 5 generations, my father and my grandfathers were the chief rabbis in the town of Mat. They all served there in the famous old beautiful synagogue that's still standing till today. This shul, as you know, was built over 200 years ago, in 1799, during the leadership of the first rabbi in Mat by the name of Rabbi Moshe Wahl. He is interred in the local cemetery in Mat. The synagogue was always a focal point of the town, and which the leadership of the brilliant rabbis that served there, they're world renowned with their scholarship and their Torah all over the world. And the rabbis that served in Mat, they made the small town so famous and popular all over the world. In 1881, my great-grandfather, he was called by the name the Koil Arya. After his scholarly work, he made a book that's named Koil Arya, and he was called by that name. He was a very famous scholar and a very holy and righteous rabbi. After his death, he's also interred in the local cemetery in Mat. His son, Rabbi Naftoli, took over, and that's my namesake, Naftoli. He also a very famous scholar and made books by the name Bais Naftula. He's also renowned worldwide. My grandfather, my father's father, took over after him, and he served in the rabbinate from Mat over 40 years. He was the author of this book called Ketzai Mata on the Mat Ephraim. This has all the customs of the high holidays, and this is today a bestseller on the market. This was sold already in almost 100,000 copies worldwide. And he passed away in 1937. He was very famous all over the world. When he passed away, my father had an older brother by the name of Moshe Leib. He took over, he became the chief rabbi in Mat. My father was then still a 15-year-old boy, and they sent him away from home to learn a yeshiva out of town. And by 18, he came back. He was already a big Talmud Chacham, they say. You know what that means? And they appointed him as assistant rabbi to his brother and helped him run the yeshiva. All the rabbis in Mat had a yeshiva for big boys, you know, from the age of 16, 17, 18, they learned by the rabbi. That building over there in Mat, next to the shul, that served as the yeshiva. The rabbis in the town lived in that building, and also the yeshiva was in that building where the boys learned. And my father helped his brother run the yeshiva. He was like the assistant dean. Till it came to World War II started, and he was still single, so he had a way of escaping. So he didn't want to go to serve in the army, so he ran away from home. He went to Budapest. Like this, he tried to save himself from going to the army and to stay alive. His brother and the family and almost everybody who lived in Mat, they were perished in the war. And my father was in Budapest. That's how he got saved, and he stayed alive. But there's this famous story that he was already in the line by the Danube River. They lined up all the Jews there that they're going to take them to throw them into the river. And he was in that line. And he said to himself, what I got to lose? I'll stay in this line for sure. It's a death sentence. I'll go into the river. I'm going to try to escape. And he said to himself, to God, if I stay alive from this, I will devote myself to published the books and the manuscripts of my grandfathers, my great-grandfathers, and help me. I should stay alive. And he just ran out of the line, and they were standing there with guns, they didn't see him. For a second, they got blind, they didn't see him, and that's how he got safe from the war. And in 1945, whenever he came back home to Mat, he was very little people stayed alive from Mat. But he came back, and he was the rabbi's brother and the rabbi's son, so they appointed him also to be now the rabbi. He should start rebuilding the Jewish community over there. They opened back up the shul. The big shul was all. They made a horse house out of it, the big shul, and so they opened up a small shul there, and they started rebuilding the Yiddishkeit over there in Mat, and at that time he was still single, so he had to get married. He had a brother-in-law. That brother-in-law was his father's son-in-law, and he stayed alive from the war, but his wife and children were perished in the war. And he contacted my father and Mat, and he told them, let's stay brother-in-laws, come take my sister. So my father went to Romania, Desh, it was the town Desh. And he went down there, and he married my mother. But they saw staying in Europe wasn't the right place to stay after it became so communism and whatever. So they came out to America. After it took time. They first went to the DP camps in Germany, and after a couple of years, in 1949, my father arrived to America. But he didn't forget what he promised in Budapest, but down the river. He came to America. He was called the Madaruf here in America, and he founded his Kolaria Research Institute called Machon Kolaria to publish all the Sfurim, and he devoted all his life for over 60 years till his last day. He passed away October 16, 2013. All his life he went around all over the world to spread the books of and mainly from the Rabbunim, from the rabbis who served in Mat. That was his whole devotion was that Mat should not get forgotten. We as children here in America, we grew up under the shadow of Mat. My father, he lived here in America, but his mind was in Mat. There wasn't one day in the year he shouldn't talk about Mat. That was his whole life, was to remember the town of Mat, where his father was the rabbi, and his grandfather, and his great-grandfather, and his great-great-father all come from Mat. And that was his whole life, that Mat should not get forgotten. He traveled many times to Mat from here, even when it was still communism. He went there, and he stayed there, and he went to the graveyard, to all the rabbis who were laying there in the cemetery. He went to pray there, and like 15 years ago, he met the mayor. He was in the mayor's office. I have pictures. He's sitting in the mayor's office, and they were discussing how the synagogue looked before the war, because then the synagogue was all run down, and they rebuilt the synagogue the same way it looked before the war. My father also had pictures and gave to them, and showed them whatever has to be done, and they discussed everything with him. And then they rebuilt the shul, they rebuilt the synagogue the way it was, and this because they decided this is called a how do you call it? It's called a landmark, and the town decided to keep this very honorable, that they have this shul in the town of Mat. And people all over the world come there constantly to see the shul. to see the shul, how nice. It's a special nice shul, if you ever saw it. And they also go to the rabbi's gravesite to pray by the rabbis, because they're very famous and popular rabbis. So they go to pray there. And even this summer, every week I got a phone call from people that they were in Mat last week and they went to see the shul and they went to the gravesite. Even Rabbi Krohn, a very known speaker, you heard of him, Rabbi Pesach Krohn. He was there with 80 people. And he said a speech in the shul and explained to them where we are and what's going on here. And this became an everyday thing that people are there. You know, the old man there watching the shul lives down the block. Down the block, whenever somebody comes, he comes to open the shul. And we had a couple of years ago, we were there, 40 people for Shabbos. We spent the whole weekend there. We prayed in the shul and we ate there. We ate in the hotel, you know, the hotel down the block. Beautiful hotel there. We stayed at 40 people were there for the weekend. We spent the whole Shabbos over there. We felt it was so uplifting, you know, that we were back in the town where our great-grandparents were. And now I hear they're rebuilding the rabbi's home. That building served as the rabbi. All the rabbis in Mat lived in that building. And also in that building was the yeshiva, where they learned with the bigger boys. And I hear it's under construction now. It's being renovated. So let's hope they're going to make something nicer, which should be a nice memory for the town of Mat. And we go every year, once a year at least, we go down there to see what's going on, wherever. I hope to visit there more often. And maybe we'll meet there sometime. I also want to tell you, my father used to talk about Mat. He did not only talk about the rabbis. He also spoke about the people from Mat, what kind of righteous people were there, and what kind of nice community, and everybody kept so together. It was like one big family, and most of the people, very wealthy people there, because or they had vineyards, or they produced wine, or they sold wine, or you worked in a wine cellar. So everything was wine. And my father used to say there used to come people from Poland, from all over the world. They used to come to Mat to buy wine and to manufacture wine. They took it to their countries, to other countries, and that's also one of the things what Mat is very famous for till today. Today they don't have kosher wine in Mat, but they have wine factories. I was there in Mat. I went to the cellars. I saw the wine cellars. Very interesting to see how they produced wine in the olden days. Maybe one day we'll still open a wine factory there from kosher wine. It's going to become, they say they're building out the building over there. They're rebuilding the rabbi's house, the yeshiva. They're going to make a kitchen there and a mikveh and a shul. Maybe they'll still make a Jewish community over there, and we'll go more often.